Hello and welcome to A Gypsy's Kiss, the vlog. I'm Shelley Carney.
And I'm Toby Eunice. Stick with us a couple of seconds and we'll give you a clue as to how Fenn answers questions when he's asked. And we're back.
And we're back. So, hello. So good to have you back with us again, once again live. And as you can see, I've put a couple of opening salvos in the chat. So if you would like to be a chat moderator, please volunteer. And if you have a particular question for us, make sure you start your statement or question with AGK so that I'm sure to see it.
So today's, like our other live streams, we're going to start with a brief presentation, and then we'll open it up to Q&A. That shouldn't prevent you from having a chat and a conversation, asking each other questions while we're presenting. But if we're going to keep the questions on topic, this subject, make sure you wait until the end of the presentation so that we can pay attention to them and give you a credible answer. And Super Chat. Tell them about
Super Chat is available if you would like to participate with that. What you do is you click on it, you put a little bit of money in it, and it highlights your name, and we'll pay attention to everything you say in the chat because you've put your money where your mouth is, basically.
Right, yeah, we'll make sure we answer every one of those questions.
A portion of that money will go to A Gypsy's Kiss and fund our trips and travels and
fun adventures.
Yes.
And I was going to say something else about the questions, but I guess it doesn't make a difference.
Questions.
Yeah, make sure the questions are on topic. We'd like to make sure that we're answering these questions. We plan in a couple of weeks to have an open-ended Q&A, so at that time you can come on and ask any questions that you want. Okay?
Okay.
Volunteers for moderators?
Any volunteers? So we have Rick Plank, Sideneck, Justin Posey, just saying hello. Would anybody like to be a chat mod? Let us know.
Chat moderator, let Shelley know so she's watching the chat, let her know, and we can make one of you moderators so that we don't get trolled. Okay?
No trolls.
No troll.
Troll patrol.
So let's go on to how Fenn answers questions.
Okay. Well, first of all, you got to shout the question at him a little bit. You never can hear me.
I know you do have to, especially more recently. And you'd think they'd get him a better hearing aid, but I'm not hard of hearing, so yeah. I don't know what it's like. I know for the people that I do know who are hard of hearing, they find it very frustrating because the technology isn't quite perfected yet. So Fenn answers how Fenn answers questions, and I think we have to cover a little bit about why this has become so important in our mind. And I'm going to add this little, it looks like the number 100. It's not, it's an acronym. It stands for "in our opinion," because I don't want our viewers to believe that this is some inside information I have for Forrest Fenn. What we present here are our opinions, and we want you to know that in advance. In our opinion, Fenn believes that he has provided everything that's needed to find the treasure. He's given us the poem, he's given us a book, he's given us several conversations, although I don't necessarily believe those were actually helpful. I'm still a big fan of it's in the poem, and there's some hints in the book, and I trust that that's an accurate representation of what he's done. Secondly, in our opinion, Fenn's decided to step back from the chase, and we explained last week why we thought that was true. We started noticing it in the May event, and we thought it was substantiated in the most recent November 2nd event. And then lastly, Fenn, we believe, doesn't particularly care whether the treasure is found in his lifetime or not. I know there seems to be a lot of discussion about that, but there has never been any indication to me for his enthusiasm about somebody finding the treasure. I think whether it is found or not is of equal importance to him. and that he could die happily, knowing that the treasure has not been found before his death. Did you notice that that for both the May 18th event and the November 2nd event, Fenn wore a Gypsy Kiss purple sweaters? One was open, a button sweater, and this one was a pullover.
Well, I noticed this one because because it was very purple.
You think that means something?
Sure, he likes purple.
Oh, okay.
Everything's a clue.
You don't think it means that that
He's a
Peggy
big
is holding
fan?
him hostage and he needs us to mount a mission to come and save him or something? No?
No.
Oh, okay.
No.
Okay, so that's why it's important. The second thing, and probably the most important thing, is the end for Fenn is drawing nigh. He's 87. For all I know, he could outlive all of us, but for all I know, he could pass tomorrow. And in my opinion, because the end is drawing nigh for him, and I don't mean this in terms of the treasure, I mean this in terms of his perception of his life, I think we will see progressively less of Forrest Fenn when it comes to these what I'd call recorded outings. I think he'll still answer the occasional email. I think he still may communicate with Jenny Kyle over at Mysterious Writings, but I think we'll see progressively less of him in public where he can be recorded either with permission or without. Now, the one caveat to that is that in the near future we can expect the Nightline product to come out, the one that was recorded in Montana with Dale and Cynthia, and then here, I'm sorry, not here in Albuquerque, but in Santa Fe at the last Collected Works event, and also they interviewed Forrest while they were here during that time. So that's still to come out. I actually haven't checked the listings to determine when it's going to happen. Somebody may do that if you go to Nightline or the Nightline webpage, and they've indicated when that particular episode is going to air. Post it on here so other people will know as well. Okay, so let's get on to how he answers questions. What?
Just checking.
Yeah, I can see it here. Isn't that cool? I don't have to keep looking over my shoulder. And you should too, except that you're going to be like 15 to 17 seconds behind me. So.
Okay.
So, so this is based on the fact that as a kind of documentarian, not only have I recorded several of Fenn's events, not only have I spent some time with him, but I've reviewed them dozens, if not hundreds of times, honestly. And I started seeing various patterns, which as an analyst you have a tendency to do anyway. And so I noticed there were certain patterns in the way he answers questions. And this is pretty consistent whether you're going to go back to Collected Works, back to Moby Dickens. And what I would recommend is I took these examples. Now, I've paraphrased them for the purposes of brevity, but one of the things I'm going to recommend after you watch this is go back to our Moby Dickens video, which is on our channel, and you can find by searching Moby. And look at that video one more time in the context of what I'm talking about here today. And of course, you can go back to all the other videos that he's been recorded in and do exactly the same thing. But he's pretty consistent across these lines. So.
The thing about the Moby Dickens one that stands out past a lot of the other interviews you'll see is that it was a variety of people asking him questions, and those people were all searchers. So they had studied the poem and they were most interested in finding the treasure, whereas all of his other interviews he did with like documentarians or news people were more focused on him and why he hid the treasure and not where it was. So I think the Moby Dickens is probably the most important piece of documentation of the way he answers questions, because he was getting questions from so many different people.
Well, it's interesting. You're absolutely right. But what's really interesting about those three events that the three events that we just talked about, the Moby Dickens, May 18th, the Lure, and the most recent event is the Searcher, whose name is Katya. I don't remember her last name. She has a very short last name. but she's a very active searcher. Fenn knows her well, and each time she asked a question that was very incisive. You know, and had she gotten the answers, they would have actually helped not only her, but the other searchers in the community. I remember very specifically at the Lure, at the screening, the Q&A at the Lure, she asked what the distance between the first clue and the last clue was. And he did a masterful job of avoiding the answer. And he's done that to her each time. He avoided the answer she asked, or she avoided answering the question she asked at Moby Dickens, at the Lure, and at this most recent one. And I can't remember what she asked, but it was another one of those, like, where he goes like, we're not going to answer that. So he has this pat answer. And that pat answer comes to a question he's answered 100 times before, and he's developed a pat answer that he knows is safe. And what I mean by safe is that it provides him protection in the form of not giving any additional information. So when you ask a question, when he's asked a question like, when you buried the treasure, did you put it in a place that you really admire? And he'll correct you. He'll answer the question by starting with a correction, and he'll say, I never said I buried it. And then in some cases he'll add, I never said I didn't bury it. But he always reverts back to, and that's his pat answer. And the reason it's his pat answer is it's tested and it's safe. It doesn't provide any real new information.
Her last name is Luce.
Luce?
That's what we see. Justin says her last name is Luce.
Oh, Katia Luce.
Luce.
I think she pronounces it Luce. Yeah.
Okay.
So the frustrated warning response actually comes when you ask him a question, and he does this a lot in writing more than verbally. You ask him a question that indicates to him that you're not following his instructions about how to find the treasure. And the most obvious one of these, and again I'm paraphrasing, is the individual that was asking about the blaze this and the blaze that, and Forrest in a very frustrated tone says, why are you searching for the blaze? Find the first clue, find out where the first clue is and go for there. And he's done that more than once if people are asking questions that go beyond the first clue. And I think that's why he continues to mention, I think there's a certain amount of his pride associated with the fact that searchers have been within 500 and progressively 200 feet within, and the searchers have discovered the first two clues. I don't know whether that's necessarily true or not. As a matter of fact, for me it is less likely, because he's used exactly that line since way back when, since 2012, where searchers have been within 200 feet of the treasure, but they didn't know that they were within 200 feet, and then searchers he believes that searchers have figured out the first two clues. And I think that for me is more than anything else an advisory, where if people can find the first two clues, they're within X number of feet of the treasure, why don't you just do that? And that he doesn't say it, he doesn't say that. But there's a certain amount of frustration in his response, whether it's verbal or written, and the frustration is, just do what I tell you. If you do what I tell you, you improve your chances of finding the treasure. On the other hand, if you're going to go out and look for the blaze, the likelihood is you're never going to come close. And I think the last at the Lure he said, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, you guys, because I think he said there are 10 billion blazes.
Well, that's what you wrote.
Oh,
there's a billion of them.
Yeah, so don't start from there. You're never going to find that. It's the combination of these clues that make the location unique.
Or of course, the searcher is wondering, am I even on the right track? Because I think I've found warm water. I think I've found Home of Brown. I think I'm in the right place, but I'm not sure what the blaze is. So they want more information about that, but he's just like, if you don't know what it is, you're in the wrong place.
And you have to go back to his response to one of the questions on Jenny Kyle's blog, where his response was, a little girl in India may be able to find the first two clues, the implication being that if that little girl in India is not boots in the ground in, one of the 4 states or in the Rocky Mountains, that the closest she can get is the first two clues, which I think is a darn good place to be if I can find where warm water's halt, and again, this is based on our understanding of the clues. If I can find where warm water's halt and canyon down on a map, that's a pretty good place to be if I can be certain about their geographic coordinates. So then the unhelpful hint, and honestly, I think these are, this is my personal opinion, that these responses are his favorite because they're very well thought out, and I think he knows he's playing with us. And the classic example of that is that if you get to the first clue, and again I'm paraphrasing, if you find the first clue, you're more than halfway to the treasure. Well, you know what, considering that the treasure is, I'm going to say, less than a quarter mile from where you're standing at the first clue, and you've driven from New Mexico to Wyoming to find it, it is obvious that you're more than halfway to the first clue from your starting point.
To the treasure.
Yeah, to the treasure, I'm sorry. And so it's always funny when I hear him answer one of those, because it really sounds like he's given you an important piece of information, when in reality he's playing with us. He's making fun, and I think he's having a good time with it, and I don't get upset over it. You know, I just think I think he's cool. I think he's a wise old coot, and I think he's got a wonderful sense of humor. And I think sometimes he invokes that sense of humor without even us knowing it.
Well, but you have to kind of put yourself in his shoes. Say that you are a parent and you've hidden Easter eggs for your children, and they're trying to find them, and instead of really working at it, they come to you and they say, "Where is it?" And you're going to give them little hints, you're going to give them little clues, but you're not going to tell them where it is, because that ruins the fun. So same thing.
And you're going to be, ideally, if you're not a good parent, but if you're a funny parent, you're going to be creative, you know, when you give them the clues that you do give them, and you're going to hope that they're wise enough in their age to be able to figure out what they are. So then there is.
It sounds like he just gave us a clue.
Yeah, another one of those. It sounds like he just gave us a clue. And the classic example, although I have to admit, let me give the caveat to this. The classic example is don't go where a 79 or 80-year-old man couldn't go. And for years, that has been interpreted as don't go where I couldn't go when I was 79 or 80. Therefore, I hid the treasure in 2009. Or 2010, which is not at all what he said. Now, I've noticed that since the video came out where we started questioning where he hid it, he's been more adamant about that. I've said I was 79 or 80. I've said it was 2009 or 2010. I read in one case, and I haven't seen the actual interview, that it was written that he said, I was 79 or 80. Now, that's a journalist's interpretation of what he said, so I don't know that he actually said that. But you have to look at everything really, really close to determine whether or not, A, he just answered the question in a way that was helpful, and B, whether or not he answered the question at all. So people ask, how old were you when you hid the treasure? Don't go, the correct answer is, I was, and a specific age. And everything else is not a correct answer, but it's not an incorrect answer. And more importantly, it's not a lie. Don't go where a 79 or 80-year-old man couldn't go is neither the correct answer, nor is it a lie. So he has a pack of those that he uses.
My
They're not
God.
quite
Do you have
answers.
an airplane?
Yeah. Do you have an airplane?
It means nothing, really. Come on.
Yeah. But you can interpret it a variety of ways. So I think the best way to get to him, especially verbally, if it's an oral opportunity, verbal opportunity, is the yes or no, because my experience is if you're face-to-face with him, if you're at an event or something, and you ask him a yes-no question, a do, does, you know, should, couldn't, et cetera, generally speaking, he answers with the yes or no, which is the danger. He could always answer it yes or no. But when he's in a public forum, he expands upon his answer. And he's done that almost every time that I've seen him when he's been asked a yes or no question. When he doesn't do it is when you write the yes or no question. Is the blaze white? He will answer, well, no, that's too obvious. He won't answer that question because he's going to give you a clue, so he's going to fake that. But if you ask him, has your, I'm making this up, has your marriage to Peggy been happy? He'll answer yes or no. And if it's in writing, he won't expand upon that. If it's verbal, if it's a verbal situation where you're face to face with him, he'll not only answer the yes or no, but he'll give you additional details.
I asked him, do you have anything that you'd like to say to the searchers? No.
No, yeah. He's very, he can do that. And that's the danger. And the reason I know it is because as a journalist and doing literally thousands of interviews, I learned not only how to ask questions, but what questions to ask to get an answer. And so it's very obvious to me when he kind of plays this role game that he does. And then my favorite is the "oh, hell no," when he completely ignores the question. And again, he's done that to Katya more than once, but the most obvious one at the recent event at Collected Works for Once Upon a While was the young lady that asked him what I thought was a well-structured question, something about, you've often said that the key word is in the poem, is important, is the key word in the poem. And then Shiloh picked up on that, asked him the question, and they got into a conversation about Fenn's stylist. And he actually answered the question about the stylist, but that's not the first time he's done it. If it's the, oh, hell no, I am not going to answer that question. You'll see it in Moby Dickens several times where his favorite, he turns away and he looks at someone and said, who let that guy in here, or something like that. It's a complete change of topic.
Or he'll say, did that guy just ask me how deep is a hole?
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
just he makes people laugh,
yeah,
so that they'll move on.
Yeah,
let it go.
Yeah. So he does those, and you have to be aware of him. So the caution in all this is go watch the recommendations rather is go watch the Moby Dickens video one more time with this new information, and take a look at how he responds to each of those questions. I'm not suggesting that because the Moby Dickens video is on our channel. I just think the Moby Dickens video was the video in which he covered all of this territory. He covered a lot of territory at Moby Dickens, much more than he did at the previous week's Collected Works, and much more than he has done ever since then, regardless of the format and who was asking the question. So it was the Moby Dickens video, I believe, not because I recorded it, and it's on my channel, but I believe the Moby Dickens video is one of the most important videos we have to evaluate Fenn and how he answers questions. If you're going to ask a question, try, first of all, not to make it, use the traditional who, what, where, when, and how. And as a journalist, I can tell you, avoid using why, because why is interpreted as questioning their integrity. Why did you decide to hide the treasure in 79 or 80? Can be a question of their, like, what do you mean, did I make a bad choice? So generally speaking, unless it's a confrontational interview, I avoid why or why not and stick to the other 5. Also, I avoid compound questions. What was it about the place that you hid the treasure, and who did you share that with? And what I've done right there is I've asked actually 2 questions, 2 different questions, as if what's referred to as a compound question. I would avoid those. I would prefer to ask 2 different questions. What was it that was special about this place, and who have you shared this place with, if anyone? So those are nice open-ended questions that gives him time to think, you know, to be able to answer it. And I'll refresh everybody's memory with the question that I asked at the Collected Works November 2nd event, where I asked him how he chose the 39 of 200, around 200 scrapbooks to put in his book. And a couple of things happened at that were important to me. Number one, Shiloh didn't translate. Fenn heard me, although I was using the same microphone that everybody else was. He heard me, he answered the question completely, and then at the end of his answer, he asked me if he had answered it to my satisfaction. And so that indicates to me he was okay with that question. Now, you have to admit it was non-threatening, B, didn't get into, you know, can you tell me where the treasure is, kind of questions, et cetera, but I think he's very open when you ask him those kinds of questions, that he doesn't feel he's being led down some, you know, legal path to answer that question. So
well, let's go back, because I have something I want to say. So at the event, the November 2nd event, I think a lot of people came there expecting to, like the Moby Dickens book signing, expected to be able to ask their questions and have them answered. And then when the first question was asked and it pertained to the treasure, they said, we're going to start off with talking about the book. So let's talk about the book. So then at that point, everybody was a little bit off center because they had not been prepared to ask questions about the book. They wanted to talk about the treasure. But they did come up with questions that pertained to the book or pertained to something that wasn't so much about the treasure, or they were trying to be sneaking around that whole asking only about the book and not the treasure. So at that point, Shiloh, I think, manipulated the conversation to where it was only about the book, and I believe he was instructed to do that. And people were a little bit thrown off center, and they were waiting. Okay, have we talked about the book enough yet? Can we ask our treasure questions? And we never got there. So a lot of people were holding their questions inside, wanting to ask them, and felt constrained not to be able to do so. So that was the feeling that I had sitting there that evening, and I wanted to ask Preston, you know, what about his forward, and I never really got the chance because, you know, it was hard to get in a question because they were going so slowly with them, finding the person to ask, and then they would say, oh no, let's ask this, oh wait, let's ask this other person. It took them 5 minutes to figure out who to let ask the question. Then the question was asked, then it was repeated, then he thought about it, then he told you a story that didn't really have anything to do with anything. I mean, the whole thing about bombs, I was like, where is this going? Right. So that was the evening that we had this time. It was totally not what we expected. It was
diametrically opposed to anything we had experienced in the past, especially if you look at, now the lure was off center simply because it was not planned.
Right.
That, you know, it was not planned, and except for Diana up on that stage, there were two other people that didn't particularly care for what was going on. Thomas in the sense that he thought this was going to be his night, Forrest in the sense that he thought it was going to be Thomas's night. And there he was answering questions about the treasure. So that's why I go back to the Moby Dickens video. The Moby Dickens video for me is Forrest Fenn being Forrest Fenn at his best, without being managed, going on as long as he wanted. Jay didn't control the conversation. Jay had a couple of questions that he asked from people that had sent questions in via their email, but he let Forrest go on and on and on until it was obvious to everybody else, to everyone in the room, that, gosh, there was not much more he could say. And there was not anyone controlling the situation. Now, that didn't change the fact that he was answering questions in the way that I have described up here, but I think that video was probably the last video that Forrest made where he had the freedom to do whatever he wanted to do. The only other person in the room, well, there were two other people in the room that could have controlled it. One was Jay's wife and partner in Moby Dickens, Carolyn, and the other was Dorothy. She happened to be there, and none of them did that. They didn't try to stop him. He just went, and I think he was really happy with it. It was a much smaller room, a much smaller audience, but he seemed to be the most comfortable at Moby Dickens about doing these things. So, okay, you ready for Q&A? Do we have any Q's and A's?
I think so. Yeah, we have a couple.
So you may have to go back to the beginning to get them, because I noticed that some people don't put the AGK. So here's a reminder, make sure that if you have a question for us so Shelley can see it on her iPad, you started with AGK so that we know it's for one of us. Are you not getting them up here?
That one's not scrolling for some reason, so I'm going to say hello to people as I read your name. Hello, Rick Plank and Sledneck and Justin Posey.
Hey. Oh.
That's okay. I didn't say a question. Let's see. CWD TV Tribal 1000. Let's see. B Cross. Hello. Chris Bischoff. He has a question. Weren't you a little surprised that Preston and Fenn didn't even mention the Fenn's car parked at the Denver Museum reference in the foreword? I realize it's probably an unhelpful hint. It seems like it was a huge statement to go unaddressed.
Hi, Chris. So actually, no, I wasn't surprised. I know that they were both aware that it had caused some conversation in the community, and I think both of them were expecting the question to come up. I don't know why it did. I had made a commitment to myself that I was going to stick to a particular question if I got the opportunity, but I don't know why it wasn't asked. And I agree with you, I was a little surprised, because I think there were a lot of people that went in with the intent of asking about it, whether or not, and the only way it was addressed was when Douglas made a mention that he wrote the foreword, and described the process. But I don't remember, I guess the answer to your question is yes, I was as surprised as you that the question wasn't asked. I think he formulated his question a little bit differently, because like you, I expected it. I expected to be asked.
Or addressed. Let's see. Justin Posey, what are your thoughts on Preston indicating there are clues in Forrest's new book? Forrest's posture following Preston's comments seemed to indicate Forrest was uncomfortable with that statement.
So I think they were both acting out a little bit. First of all, we know that Forrest insists in making a distinction between clues and hints. So I think the first thing is that when Preston said there are clues in the book, my guess is what disturbed Forrest about it was that he didn't use the word hints and not clues. I believe that if you evaluate, there are hints in almost everything that Forrest has written or said. If you differentiate between hints about his life and himself versus hints about the treasure, it is my opinion that when Forrest talks about hints, he's not talking about the treasure, he's talking about himself and his life. And I think that would be true in the scrapbooks. I think the scrapbooks are the equivalent of flashlights into the dark. I don't mean dark in a negative way. I mean the obscure life of Forrest Fenn. And I think to get a better understanding of the obscure life of Forrest Fenn gives you a better opportunity to see how he put the poem together, and what is said in the poem based on who Forrest Fenn is. So that's what I think. So Douglas misspoke when he used the word clues. I think he's accurate if you replace the word clue with hint, and I think it's accurate if you interpret hint as a reference to Forrest Fenn's life as opposed to the location of the treasure.
Okay. Let's see. We're saying hello to David Dow. Hello, David. Let's see. Rick Plank. I got the feeling that Forrest wanted to go on, but he said that he was not in control here. Did you also get that feeling?
Nothing that Dorothy and Forrest do together is unplanned. I can tell you that from that experience and from the experience of our participation in it, there's a very strict planning process that Dorothy adheres to and implements via her staff. So if my guess is they agreed to 1 hour beforehand, and it was getting close to that period of time, and I was watching the lady with the French accent, I forgot her name. Is it like Olivia? Forrest references her. She says something about, she says more than once, this is the last question. I think she said that twice. This is the last question, then we're going to close it up. And she was looking at her, and I was standing over to behind her and to her left, and she looked at her watch both times. And so my sense is that there was an agreement about how long this event was going to last. The agreement was probably stipulated by Dorothy, since it's her property, and agreed to by Fenn and Douglas and Shyla.
Okay. Michael D. I asked last week about another book by Fenn. I was wondering if the book inside the treasure chest might get published after the chest is found. The only book is the autobiography, right?
Yeah, the only book that I'm aware of that could be referred to as a book in the treasure chest is the Fenn, the 20,000 word autobiography Fenn wrote and miniaturized and put in the olive jar. Whether or not it's published is up to the finder. And
it could be something that was just an excerpt from the book anyway that's already been
It could
published.
very well be, yeah. And I don't, if your question is, will Fenn publish that before he passes? I don't believe he will. I believe Fenn believes that's the property of the finder of the treasure. They can do with it what he wants. He said that more than once.
Justin Posey asks, which question were you planning to ask Forrest at the recent book signing, Toby?
The one that I asked.
Okay. Which was about how many chapters,
how did he choose the chapters from his nearly 200 scrapbooks to put into. What I thought was curious, what was curious to me about the answer is that he had originally, what's that, confirmation bias? So he said he had originally planned to put in 40. He and Jessica, who's a friend of ours, after editing it, realized that wasn't one that they were, there was one that they weren't interested in putting in that he wasn't happy with. And so he ended up with the number 39 chapters in the new book. And of course, from the Toby Eunice confirmation bias, that went with the 369, Forrest Fenn numbering system that I'm always talking about.
CWD, AGK, did Fenn store the treasure at his home before he hid it, or the gallery? He had already sold his gallery by that time.
Yeah,
that's right. He has a vault in his home, is that correct?
He does have a vault in his home, yeah.
Stored it in the vault in his home most of the time.
Before he would occasionally take it out and put it on his dining room table. But most of the time it was stored in his vault.
And he would take things out and put different things in.
And the reason is the gallery was long sold by the time he had decided to execute this plan.
And let's see, Chris Bischoff. Sorry, off topic a bit. Do you recall an instance in his books or interviews where Forrest talks about Slip and Slide Creek? It's killing me, but can't find a specific reference.
Chris, I'm sorry, I do not recall that reference, but I will qualify that by saying I focus primarily on the visual materials, the videos, sometimes the audios. It is rare that I look at the written materials. As a matter of fact, like you guys, whenever I need to look at the written materials, I go to terryscant.com, which has become not quite yet an invaluable resource, but an important resource in all of this.
Mm-hmm. Mr. G, Fenn has said that Where Warm Waters Halt happens at 1,000 places in the Rocky Mountains. Do you believe that the Where Warm Waters Halt in the poem is one of these places, or do you think that his Warm Waters Halt is something completely different, i.e. only one specific place in the entire search area?
Wow, interesting question. Okay, so I think that the way Forrest phrased it, and this is one of his other, this falls into one of these, basically what he said is there's lots of places where warm waters halt, but, and this is my paraphrasing afterwards, but there is only one with exact geographic coordinates that will get you halfway to the treasure. So both things could be true. There are thousands of places that could be interpreted as where warm waters halt. Or I'm not even sure he said warm waters halt. I think he said thousands of places that could be interpreted as warm waters. But there is only one that has the geographic coordinates necessary to get you more than halfway to the treasure. And it is in the Rocky Mountains in New Mexico. No, don't want to start anything there.
One more question. Do you think that Fenn in years past flew his plane close to the treasure location and even landed?
Wow. So we have a hypothetical that Fenn hid the treasure in the 2001-2003 timeframe when he still owned an aircraft and when he was still a licensed pilot, and that he landed in a location that was convenient in which to hide the treasure. We do not believe that he followed that same process afterwards. And the reason is he doesn't have to know. He is of the opinion that whoever finds the treasure will let it be known that the treasure is found. So I don't think he's, like I said, I don't think he spends a lot of time worrying about whether the treasure has been found or not, whether or not the treasure will be found. So the answer to your question is, after, in this hypothetical that we have, after the first time when he hid the treasure, no, I don't think he flew back.
Okay. I am out of questions here, so
Really?
yeah.
Any up at the top?
I looked through everything.
No,
We're a little bit slower today. A little bit slower conversation going on.
Oh, it's
today.
okay. Well, it was not exactly. There were people that probably feel the same way about a lot of these and probably had done the same kind of analysis.
Mm-hmm.
So next week.
Next week, our review of Once Upon a While. We're going to read the book and share what we think about it with you.
What we think about the contents. We'll open it up to Q&A. Shelley and I are both going to go through the book, and by that time we should have something for you in terms of opinions and some of these ideas on hints versus clues. But or is that just conversation or questions? I don't want to miss anybody.
Michael D says, thank you for your vlogs. And Jan Kerb says, could the treasure be on private land that he owns somewhere in the 4 states?
In my opinion, Jan, no. The reason is it being on private land, whether he owns it or not, creates a whole new set of problems for the finder of the treasure, especially if the treasure is discovered after his passing, since the law applies differently to someone who's deceased, whether or not they own that property, because the ownership of the property passes on to someone else.
Mm-hmm.
And that someone else is going to be someone who may be just as interested in owning the treasure then than they are now. I don't think a lot of his family is interested in owning the treasure. I think, on the other hand, if he had hid it on his own property and then he passes, and then the treasure is found, it is very possible that one of the family members could lay claim to it, because the property would fall by will into their ownership. So, no, I don't think it's on anybody's private property.
Okay. This is from Justin Posey. Forrest originally had an IOU in the chest as a way to see if it had been found. He has since devised a better scheme. Any thoughts on what the methodology is?
I think the methodology is as simple as being convinced in his own mind that anyone who found the treasure would be wise enough after the find to announce that, if nothing else, the treasure has been found. Now, we've discussed in other videos our plan, which is to announce the finding of the treasure, but to do it anonymously. So I think Forrest is confident that whoever finds the treasure will announce that it's been found, whether anonymously or not. And the reason is there's no reason not to inform anyone. And I think he went through that thought process. There's no reason not to inform anyone that the treasure has been found, whether or not you want to do it anonymously. I don't think there's magic in there. I don't think there's GPSs, and I don't think there's, internet wireless signals, etc., or cameras. What do you call them? Hunting cameras. Those, they don't call them hunting cameras. They're cameras that you wrap around a tree and you come back to determine. Well, they now have those that are cellular if you want to use them. So I don't think there's any of that magic.
Okay. Yeah, I think he put it out there, and he knows where it is. If he wants to go back and get it, he could, but he's not going to. He would have done it by now. Let's see. Steve Rempel. Hello, enjoy your blogs. In the book, The Thrill of the Chase, page 128, he writes at age 58, he realizes that he has slept a little over 19 years of his life, and 3 of those years were on Monday. Is this a clue?
I don't think so, and here's why. There was a point at which Fidel Castro, the notorious leader of the communist Cuba, realized that he was spending 15 minutes a morning shaving. And he added all that up, and he came to the conclusion that whatever it was, I don't know what that adds up to over a year, but it was multiple days, 10 days, whatever it was. That was 10 days of his life that he was wasting shaving. And I think for all of us, especially when you get to our age, you start thinking about, how much time you spend with things that in the grand scheme of your life aren't going to make a difference. I think Fenn just came to that. That's when you start thinking about writing your memoirs, because you come to that realization that you could have spent your days in wiser ways. Now, at the same time, you have to look at the life that he's led and the contributions that he's made, both to his family, to the art community, with his service to the nation during the Vietnam War. So I don't necessarily believe that his life was wasted in any way, or that he wasted any time. Honestly, I'd say he made the best use of not only what he had in terms of intellect and emotion. I think he made the best time, or the best use of his time that he had. And we can only hope that we experience the same thing. But I can tell you that you also look back and you say, why do I spend 10 minutes a day shaving? Why don't I just let a beard grow? The answer in my case is, my beards are ugly. It makes me look kind of gruff and ogre-ish.
All right. So it's a game and trail cam.
That's it. Game and trail cam.
Justin.
Thank you.
You've been very helpful today with all of your chiming in. I think you need to stand here. He's being real helpful. He's giving us all the answers. It's good. Where's the treasure, Justin? Just thought I'd ask. Let's see. They're just talking to each other at this point.
Okay. Well,
and that's about it.
Yeah, we've used up 50 minutes of my life here, so this is one of those 50 minutes I'll have to look back in 10 years and say, was that a good investment?
Was that a good use of my time that day?
Well, I get to spend time with you.
Well, the thing of it is with YouTube, it is our legacy,
right,
because it will be up for years to come.
Right. 1,000 years from now, they're going to be looking
Well, I don't know, 1,000 years from now, maybe 7 or 8 years from now.
Look what we found, these two crazy people.
Because I look at videos sometimes and I'm like, how is this video from 8 years ago still in the number 5 slot? Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so going completely off topic there.
That was pretty good, though.
Our review of Once Upon a While is coming up next week. What else do we have to tell them?
I just posted a photo album of close-up or macro high-resolution photos of all the postmarks in The Thrill of the Chase. So if you're a postmark person, they'll be helpful to you, because they are literally very big images, 4 and 5 megabyte images in macro mode. So take a look at our blog, gypsyskiss.com, and see if they're helpful to you. our friend from Texas that helped us hide the treasure.
Clayton?
Clayton sent me a really interesting PDF file on how one writes a poem that's a puzzle. It's basically instructions for if you're going to write a puzzle, here's how you do that. And it was, I think he said it was written back in either the late 90s or the early 2000s, maybe before that. Anyway, he sent it to me, and I think we're going to do an analysis of that and see if there's enough to talk about in a show.
Cool.
So I think it'll be a lot of fun. And I know that there are postmarks in Once Upon a While, so after we get to reviewing it and completed our review, I'll go and shoot those postmarks and put them up on gypsykiss.com. Okay?
And my new channel comes out on Thursday.
Tell them about your new channel.
Oh, well, it's awesome. I love it. It's called The Softer Side of Relationship Coaching for Men. And I started it because I have a channel for women that's specifically geared towards women who are in my age group, who might be looking for a change or a new career. And I was getting a lot of men watching my videos because they're loyal to YouTube. They subscribe, they watch. So I decided at that point, I'm going to make a whole new channel just for men because they need to be rewarded for their loyalty. And so I'm going to put that on my Shelley Carney Productions channel, The Softer Side, and it starts this Thursday. We're going to be talking about what a woman wants in a man, and it's based on my opinions and my perspective, and I'm not a doctor, I'm not a therapist, I have an observation of what men I like to be around and why I like to be around them, and what qualities you might cultivate to have that be you. So that's what happens on Thursday.
Big caveat, she's been married to the same guy for 33 years, and that's not going to change.
No, that's not going to change.
But I can tell you from my experience with Shelley that she has a real sensitivity towards men and how we behave, especially towards women. And she pretty much knows what she likes and doesn't like. And I think that's reflected in her relationship with Kevin, and to some extent in our business relationship, because we one of the things I
wouldn't hang out with you if I didn't like you.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and one of the things that we did early on was I felt a lot more comfortable with her having conversations about the business that I might not have otherwise had. I would have just kind of held it inside or whatever. We can have those conversations, and I think it's good for the growth of our business. Okay?
All right.
So next week, our review of Once Upon a While?
Yes.
That's all I got.
All right. Thank you so much for watching today, and please do share this video with your friends and talk about it amongst your neighbors. Get out there and study the Moby Dickens video, and have a great week. And for Gypsy's Kiss the Vlog, I'm Shelley Carney.
And I'm Toby Eunice. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week.
Bye-bye.